Good morning and welcome back to the channel. I thought I'd give you an update on our little ladies. Today's Thursday, so they've been here at the house for 8 days and they are doing amazing. We just cleaned out their shavings this morning and so they're very excited. They're in there kicking the shavings around, playing, running back and forth. As you can see, they've already made a mess of their waters. It's a constant job to get the shavings cleaned out of the waters. Hi, girls. They're beginning to lose some of their little chick fuzz, and their primary feathers are coming in on their wings, or what people call their flight feathers. And then their little tails are starting to come in, their little tail feathers. They're just so fun. They're starting to pop up on their waters, so they get up here and then they get clear up on the edge of the frame if I leave the top open very long. They're just doing amazing. They're so much fun to have in the house with us. We did have a couple of beautiful days where outside it was at 60, 65 degrees, and so we wanted to open the windows on the house and get some fresh air in here. So we turned the heaters off in the house. So as a result, what we did was we added an extra heat lamp to just protect our ladies. So the kennel is set up the same way you saw on my last video. However, we did add this one on this end over here. Now, the way I did that was I just put a couple of screws in here, and then I'm literally using the clamp of the heat light, and that's holding it in. Now, we are all closed up, and the heaters are back on, because we are having a beautiful spring day. Let me show you a clip of what it looks like outside. I'm really glad these guys are in here. I can't imagine how much electricity and other resources I would use trying to heat the big brooder house to about 90 degrees, 80 to 90 degrees. So by having them in the house that's already heated, we're saving those resources and we're limiting our carbon footprint. Now that we have the windows shut on the house, it's back to about 65, 70 degrees in here, maybe even 75. So as you can see, these babies are a little hot actually. See, they're behind the light and they're all bunched up. They're trying to get out of the heat. Thankfully, this particular light that I always install right here, if I need to, it turns off. And so then I can turn it off and on as I feel like they might be too cold. The best thing about your baby chicks, or the most important thing about your baby chicks, is just watch them. If you listen to them, if you observe what they're doing, they're gonna let you know, are they too hot, are they too cold? You know, do they not feel very good? Are they lethargic? One of the things that cracks me up all the time about these baby chicks is that they will lay out flat underneath the light. And I always come in and I'm like, oh my goodness, are you okay? But most of the time, I mean, they're just enjoying that warmth. One of the things I really recommend is, if you are getting into chickens, is make sure you do your research before you buy your chicks. I know it's super tempting to go to the feed store and like, oh my gosh, they're so cute. Even if you're standing right there in the feed store, check your chicken for your zone. I buy Red Stars because they are very cold hardy. If you watched my video on chickens in the winter, you'll find that my chicken coop gets really, really cold. These girls are designed, they're bred for colder climates. They're also amazing egg layers. These girls are advertised, or they say that they'll lay 360 eggs a year. Now, I don't overly force my girls to lay by altering their environment very much, so I always plan on or hope for 300 eggs in a year. And that's a lot of eggs. They're a great egg layer. They do awesome in the cold weather. They are superb foragers. So they do a great job going out on all of our acres and foraging away, which limits my feed bill. They even forage in the winter. I have a clip of one of my last spring's hens, so they would be just barely a year old, and she was out last night in the snow. This can be a drawback of having a cold hardy hen. She doesn't know to go in when it's snowing. She does not seem to be bothered at all by the snow, neither does the Great White Pyrenees cross. He seems to be enjoying the weather. But my cold hardy hens, they really do like to forage even at 0 degrees, snow, rain. It doesn't seem to bother them. which is why I restrict their movement if it gets below -10. The only thing that really slows my girls down is if the snow is really deep. That definitely keeps them in their hen house and in their flight pen. But most of the time, regardless of the weather, they're out foraging. They will be out in all types of weather. And so they get all wet and they get really, really kind of nasty, right? And then they take that back into their hen house. And like with most livestock, the cold, it is something we combat, but it's really the moisture. I have to keep my hens dry, or my chicken coop needs to stay as dry as possible, which is why even in the coldest days I have at least one vent open in my chicken coop, because it's the moisture that's going to give them frostbite, not necessarily the cold. I'm very careful to make sure that I have waterers that do not leak. I want to make sure that their bedding is as clean as possible. There are lots of techniques you can use with your bedding for your chickens. I personally don't use the deep litter bedding because I clean my bedding out about every 10 days in my chicken coop. This is how I combat the moisture, because my girls go out in the snow and they drag all that moisture in. I obviously don't want to limit their foraging if I can keep from it. I clean out their shavings and straw, and I put in new. The great thing about chickens, or the important thing about chickens, is do what works for you and do what works for your chicken. Every breed is going to be a little bit different. Everybody's setup is going to be different. I live in the north where it's cold and we have lots of snow. You may be in the south. You may have humidity problems. There can be lots of different things for your setup. So make sure that you're figuring out what's best for your chickens. Okay, so just a couple more things before we go today. It's always a challenge when you're buying chicks to get the gender that you want. My red stars are what's called a sex link. So any breed, there are multiple breeds that are sex links. Any breed that's a sex link, they literally hatch different colors. So the pullet, or the female, hatches a different color than the cockerel or the male. This makes it very easy to tell genders. So all of my red stars are guaranteed by the hatchery to be pullets. All kinds of different breeds. They're not sex links. You then have to determine whether or not you're getting cockerels or pullets. And if you're wanting hens or pullets, that can be difficult. Now, when they're really, really little, some people are good at telling a pullet from a cockerel by the spacing of the pelvis. The hens or the pullets will have a little bit larger spacing of the pelvis. But one of the easier ways, for me at least, to tell is by looking at their flight feathers, or their primary feathers. Our little mystery chick, I'm pretty sure this one's a cockerel. When we look at his primary feathers, he has a nice arch. So it starts right here at his body, and it just arches right through. Nice and smooth little arch. Let's look at one of these pullets. So when we pull her wing out, you'll see that there's a little bit of a step, right? So these primary feathers that start at her body go out. They're almost straight across. And then you look at these flight feathers, or these primary feathers out here, and they're a lot longer. So instead of that swoop, that arch, there's a little bit of a step in it, right? So it comes across and then it gets longer. This is the way to tell, one way to tell a pullet from a cockerel. But again, they need to be a week or 10 days older to be able to tell that. If you're looking at infants at the feed store, then that is not something we can do. So that's called feather sexing. As you're caring for your little babies, you'll have to watch for developmental delays. You want to make sure that somebody isn't too small, or that they're not running around like the rest of them. But another thing we need to look for is the horrible dirty rear end. These little babies are still learning how to preen themselves, how to clean themselves. Unfortunately, sometimes it gets stuck on their vent, the feathers on the outside of their vent. If you don't get that cleaned off, sometimes it can literally cause a plug, and your baby girl can get sick. Now, the way I do that, hold on, darling, is I have a rag. It's designated for this job, and I just get it wet with some warm water, and I just start by just holding it against there. Because the big thing is that's hard, and you're going to want to soften it first. And then I put on a pair of gloves, and I pull it off of the feathers. Just be really careful. Don't pull too hard. Make sure you're being gentle, because you can tear their skin, and the last thing we want to do is hurt them. As you can see, she wants down to play, but it's not hurting her at all. So we're going to soften that up. I'm going to pull that off, and I'm just going to keep checking them. So I check my girls twice a day to make sure that we don't have anything stuck on them. And if they do, then we take care of it. Well, we hope you've enjoyed the update of our baby chicks. Please let us know if you have any questions. We'd love to hear from you. And please subscribe and help support our wonderful homestead. Thanks for watching.